In this lesson, welcome to the basic ingredients of remote working. Now, we're not building a cake or making a cake right now, but there are ingredients to making this, working remotely, work out for everyone, including managers and workers of all kinds. So let's start with the key ingredient.
Trust.
Without trust, you have nothing. Trust is very important. Without trust, you really don't have much else because no one can trust you. What is trust? It's a feeling of mutual respect and understanding of what is supposed to happen between friends, for example, and the same goes true for between workers and managers, workers and each other. Trust is something that works in everything in life.
Building trust takes time.
Yeah, trust is not something that usually happens within 5 seconds. It can. There are times you'll meet somebody and you immediately trust them. Maybe that's foolish, but it's also a possibility. Trust does take time to build up. Without trust, again, you don't have a lot. And that's followed by...
Losing trust is instant.
You know, all that time and effort you put into building a relationship, making sure the relationship was a good one, full of trust, that can be lost in a second. Trust is a fragile thing. It doesn't mean you have it forever. You can lose trust. You can sometimes build it back, but even when you build it back, there may always be in the back of someone's mind, I don't know if I trust them. How many times have you talked to people who say, I don't know if I trust that person? That is a bad sign. It could be a gut level thing. And don't ever think that your gut is not telling you correctly how to feel something. Sometimes you meet someone for the first time and I don't trust them. There's something about that person you don't trust. And you're probably right. And more often than not, those feelings of distrust are correct. And somewhere down the road, that person will do something to cause distrust. Not always, but usually our guts don't lie that much. They can sense why there's distrust. And remember, trust is important. Trust can take time to build, and it can be lost instantly, which leads us to...
Trust is the cornerstone of remote working and managing.
If there's any one thing more important even than computers and tech and knowing your job and getting along, it's trust. If you lose trust, you've lost everything. If you're the worker and people don't trust you, it's probably not a good thing. If you're a manager and people don't trust you, including management above you, that's probably not a good thing. Trust is important. I can't say that enough times. It's very, very important because especially when you're remote, you don't have really many other ways to evaluate someone. You can look at the work that they're doing. You can see how they react in certain situations, but you don't really have that ability to feel them as if you were right next to them. You're missing a sensory perception there. So you have to rely on extrasensory things to provide or give you that trust. Trust is important. Let's move on.
Key to building and maintaining that trust, open and clear communications.
Nothing is as important also as communicating clearly with people. Don't lie to people. Don't mislead people. Don't tell people things that aren't true. Don't hide facts that can help other people. Clear communications, especially working remotely, are very key to not only building trust, but to enabling a company, agency, or wherever you work to succeed. The more people trust each other and communicate clearly with each other, the better off everyone will be. The relationships as well as the productivity and the reputation of that company or agency or wherever you may work.
To facilitate this communication, be available when you're expected to be.
I can't tell you how many times we've looked for people who weren't around. Call them up. They're not there. Call them up again. They're not there. Call them up 5 times. They're not there. 3 days have gone by. They're not there. They don't answer their cell phones. They don't answer emails. They don't answer text messages. Have they died? Have they disappeared? Are they secret agents on their way to another country? We don't know, because you can't get a hold of these people. And every so often, we've had cases where people were gone so long, we let them go. We had no idea where they were. I guess we're done. And then they would call a week later and go, I'm sorry, I got busy. You got busy? Yes. Unfortunately, they were not busy on anything the company was doing, and they didn't communicate. So again, trust, communicate clearly. Don't disappear. Disappearing, whether you're a manager, whether you're an employee, a worker, an upper manager, an owner, it doesn't matter. The results are the same. If people cannot find you, they'll look for someone else to find. And that goes all the way up the chain. Managers are just as guilty as employees and workers of the same problems. Don't disappear. Keep people appraised of where you are. It'll help you. It'll help everyone.
And as part of that, attend scheduled meetings.
Yeah, if you schedule the meeting, okay, now this is the worst of all. If you schedule the meeting, show up. Don't skip on your own meetings. That's a bad sign. If other people set up meetings and they're important meetings, they're status meetings, there's something that really needs to happen. Maybe you've got a customer complaint meeting. Whatever that meeting is, show up. Don't disappear. Again, disappearing from the meeting. If you have an emergency, it doesn't matter how bad the emergency is, unless you're truly hurt or somebody else is hurt around you. Send a message, write an email, call. It doesn't take more than probably 30 seconds to say, I'm sorry I can't make the meeting, I'll explain later. Communicate. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Don't disappear. You ruin trust. These are key points. Make sure you're there. Make sure you show up at those meetings, because if you don't, somebody else who may be there needs you. Or you need to hear what other people are saying. These are all things that don't look good on you or anybody working with you. That's called teamwork, too. You don't let your team down. People remember that. It goes back to trust again. If you let a team down, that team doesn't want you on that team because you're not trustworthy. So don't disappear.
Make a point to write brief status notes to keep others apprised of your activities.
That kind of goes back to what we just mentioned. Write a note. Do something. Don't assume that people know what you are doing when they may not know what you're doing. If you don't communicate clearly, people won't know what you're really up to. They won't know, did you finish that? It also goes back to disappearing. If you disappear and you owe somebody an update, maybe a daily update or maybe a weekly update, and it's that time. It's time for that clearly daily update. Where's my daily update? You actually read those? I thought you never did, so I figured I wouldn't send it. Don't assume your managers aren't reading those daily updates or your team members aren't. They probably are. They may not say much about them, but don't assume they don't care. They might. And if you don't start telling people what you're doing proactively, then guess what? They'll think you're doing nothing. I used to tell my daughter when she was little, I called you up. Did you leave a voicemail? No. Then you didn't call me. But I did call you. Did you leave a voicemail? No. Then you didn't call me. Leave a voicemail, then I'll believe you. And that goes for the same with employees, managers. Let people know what you're doing. Communicate. It's important.
And overall, stay engaged at all times.
Yeah, what that means is even if you're bored, get on board, because you've got to be engaged in what you're doing, in what people are expecting of you, and what you expect of them. Clear communications, trust, don't disappear. All of that will help with engagement. Make sure that you are very proactive and communicate clearly at all levels of your day. Even though it might bother some people, it's better to write more notes than not write any at all. Send a brief note. Finish this assignment, starting on my next one. Then people know what you're doing. Always communicate. Maybe you come in the morning and say, hi, I finished this stuff yesterday, or I'm going to continue on something. What do I do next? Or should I continue on this, or should I move on to something else? Because that way you're communicating. You're letting people know, hey, I'm here. I'm with you. I'm ready to do work. I'm engaged. I'm involved. Your team will appreciate that. Your bosses, your managers will appreciate it. And so will your coworkers. Because everyone will know where things are, where we are.
And next, some points on participation. Firstly, avoid isolation by participating.
One of the biggest complaints of working remotely is, I feel so isolated. I'm so alone. Did you show up at the meeting the other day? No, I hate those meetings. If you claim you're alone, but you don't show up at meetings or you don't communicate with people, you will be alone. After a while, nobody will want you around. You have to be there. You have to communicate with people. Be proactive. Be engaged. Do things to make sure that everybody knows what you're doing and how you're doing it. It'll make a difference.
Work actively with team members and managers.
Again, proactivity. Don't assume, again, that everyone knows what you're doing. Be very proactive. If you find problems with something, bring them up. Don't stay quiet. If you think there's an issue in a process or a workflow, when you're remote, that's really key, because those issues left alone can magnify. We don't want to amplify bad things. We want to amplify good things and some bad stuff. If there are issues with workflows or processes, amplify those to your management. Let them know, because otherwise it's going to be too late by the time people figure it out, and you may get blamed for it. You don't want that. You don't want to be blamed for something that you could have easily talked about, and that includes managers. Managers are just as guilty as any worker in not communicating up the chain. And owners can be just as guilty of just ignoring everything. There's no one up the chain. Now it goes down the chain. You don't want to be on the hitting end of a manager who decides to blame somebody for something they did. That happens too. Be proactive. Communicate clearly. Stay engaged and stay active in everything you're doing. Be proactive. Make sure people know where you are, who you are, what you're doing.
And in being proactive, don't just listen. Engage and lead where possible.
Yeah, this is basic leadership. Leadership is more than just giving orders, top down. It's about listening. It's about being engaged. It's about making sure that you are part of the team, that you are part of the solution, not the problem. If there's a problem, then solve it or give suggestions for solving it. Or if nothing else, let someone know there's a problem you're not sure how to fix. That will go a long way to making sure that everyone works remotely better.
Assume responsibilities.
This is something that, whether you're working remotely or anywhere, frankly, anything in life, assume responsibility. Assume that you're in charge of something, that you have something to do, that what you're doing is very important to what the team is doing, or what your manager needs, or what your coworkers need, or just flat out what you need to make your job better. Be accountable. Make sure you're not just responsible, but you're accountable. In other words, don't slough things and try to blame someone else for it. Take responsibility. Being remotely, there's not a lot of people you can blame because everybody's remote. You don't know what they're doing always. But make sure that when you're dealing with other members in your group or team, that you communicate clearly with them, that you assume responsibilities for your behaviors, your actions, and that you're accountable for the things you say, do, or want. That'll make a big difference to relationships, and that builds trust as well.
Our last point on participation, reach out across groups.
When you work remotely, you don't have the ability to go up and down a floor and talk to other people, or to just go around a corner and meet a group of people, or going to the water fountain and just gossiping. It's amazing what gets done inside of an office when you're there. When you're home, you can't just say, oh, no, hold on, I'm going to go upstairs and visit the sales guys. You can't. You'd have to call them. You have to reach out. Remember there was an old commercial in the old days, reach out and touch someone. Well, that's basically what you need to do. Reach out and touch those you work with. Touch your managers. Touch the people maybe above you, or just touch your own coworkers. Touch people you want to reach out to. Call someone and just say hi. You can do that. It's part of retaining the warmth in a relationship that is so hard to get sometimes when you are remote. So be communicative, whether you're dealing with clients, whether you're dealing with people within the organization or outside of the organization. It all depends on what your job responsibilities are. Communicate, communicate, and communicate. Extend, reach out beyond your little circle of influence as much as you can. It lets people know where you are, that you're there. It makes people feel better about you. That builds trust. That's important.
Next, some advice on proactivity, because being proactive is hard enough in-house. It's even more crucial remotely.
We talked a little bit about this in previous slides. Proactivity, doing something before they've even asked you to do it, is really key in a remote environment. If you want to stand out, be the person everyone says, oh, that person is a real doer. They can do things. They are great. I had a problem and that person solved it. You solved it. How did you solve it? You were proactive. You let people know about it. Or you found that there's a workflow like we talked about earlier. You fixed it. Or maybe you found a way around it and told somebody else, oh, here's how you fix that process. This is all about building trust again and making sure that you have what it takes to get the job done, to grow. In the old days, if you're working in an office, people can observe you, they can watch you, they get a feel for what you do and how you do it. So that makes them happy to promote you, to make sure that you're doing your job, to make sure that you're accomplishing something. You're on the management track or you're on a leadership track. You can't do that remotely as well unless you go out of your way to be proactive. And people will notice. People always notice.
If you are a remote manager, don't wait for remote workers to contact you. Reach out, touch base, stay engaged and connected with your staff.
Because if you're remote, you don't know what they're doing, much less than if you were with them. Managers already have a problem not knowing what anybody's doing. Half the managers out there are just ostriches, head in the ground, hidden, and then they pop up every so often and go, anybody see me? Good. I'm going to go back and hide a while. That's not management. I remember one time years ago, I called a very large phone company. We were one of their clients, and we were a big client for them. And we called the manager, and the manager goes, how did you get my number? Not how can I help you? How did you get my number? Well, amazingly enough, we found it. What do you want? We'd like you to help us. Okay. And that was an interesting experience and really lack of management of somebody who didn't want to be seen. Well, that's not going to work remotely. Again, if people don't see you, you've disappeared. If you can't solve problems when they need to be solved, what good are you? Managers are just as susceptible to bad remote working as anyone else. And so managers that like to hide, not good anymore. Get your head out of that sand and start looking around, because you need to be more proactive. You need to talk with people to find out what they're doing. I know managers that call maybe 5 minutes a day for anybody. Talk to people. You've got to get out there to find out what they're doing, whether they're workers, supervisors, or other managers. If you don't know what's going on, there's a good chance they don't either. And if you're the one telling them what's going on and you're not, you now have chaos building underneath you. You need to be proactive, just like anyone else. You need to be there, engaged. Without that, your department or the things you run are not going to run well, and you will be noticed for the wrong things.
And if you're a remote worker, our last piece of advice in this lesson is Don't wait around for something to happen. Be proactive with your tasks and communications. It's better to inform more than keep people wondering what you're doing. Proactivity can often separate the person promoted from the one laid off.
Sound familiar? That's exactly what managers have to do and everyone else. Stay engaged, proactive, make sure people know what you're up to. It's all about communication when it comes down to it. And that concludes this lesson. We'll see you in the next one.